The story begins with Curtis admiring the huge clouds in the sky while taking a rain shower, but instead of water, it feels like motor oil is pouring down. Of course, this is just a crazy dream because the weather is actually wonderful. Afterward, Curtis has breakfast with his wife Samantha and their deaf daughter, Hannah, before heading to work. He works at a construction company while Samantha takes care of the house and Hannah, and also sews things to sell at the local market on Saturdays. In the afternoon, Samantha is hosting some friends at home who brought their children to play. One of them notices Hannah holding a dangerous piece of wood with nails, and Samantha has to run to stop her since shouting won't work. Shortly after, it starts raining heavily, causing the construction workers to stop and head to the bar. At home, Samantha teaches Hannah the sign for storm while they watch the rain through the window. After the bar, Curtis drops off his colleague and best friend Duarte at home. They chat, and Duarte says Curtis has a wonderful life, but Curtis admits that not everything is as beautiful as it seems. Their conversation is interrupted by Duarte's wife, who silently calls him inside. Before continuing, I ask you all to subscribe to the channel so we can keep growing and leave a like on the video. The next day, Curtis is cleaning the yard so Hannah won't pick up any more dangerous things. Suddenly, a storm appears and a lightning bolt strikes the ground, making the dog, Red, bark like crazy. When Curtis tries to hold Hannah's hand, the dog breaks free and attacks Curtis, biting his arm. However, Curtis wakes up from another nightmare. During breakfast, he can't stop thinking about how real the dream felt and keeps Hannah away from the dog. Samantha asks what's wrong, but Curtis leaves angrily without touching his food. At work, Curtis is distracted and keeps looking at his arm, thinking he still feels the pain. The boss, Jim, is angry about the delay caused by the rain and wants them to make up for lost time. On the way to work, Curtis asks Duarte to help him get some extra supplies. Later, Curtis takes a break and sees a flock of blackbirds flying in strange patterns. He asks Duarte if he also finds it strange, but Duarte doesn't see anything. Due to the overtime, Curtis arrives late to the parent-teacher meeting at Hannah's school, covered in mud. They learn more about essential sign language for their children, something Curtis needs to practice more. Since he doesn't spend as much time with Hannah as Samantha does, he still doesn't know many words. Sometime later, it starts raining again, and Curtis rushes to get into the car with his daughter. The rain makes it hard to see, and they end up crashing the car. Curtis is bleeding, but Hannah is fine. At that moment, men appear outside the car and start breaking the windows, holding Curtis while another kidnaps the girl. Suddenly, Curtis wakes up screaming, realizing it was yet another nightmare. He goes downstairs looking sick, and Samantha is worried, but Curtis promises it's just a cold and asks her to go to the market with Hannah. While Samantha sells her items and negotiates prices with customers, Curtis uses the extra supplies from work to build a fence around the doghouse and locks Red in it, apologizing. He should be cleaning up the yard, but gets distracted by a door leading to a storm shelter. Curtis finds the key in an old pot and manages to open it, going inside to consider a new idea. At night, Samantha adds the money she earned at the market to their savings for a vacation. She asks Curtis why Red is outside now, but he gives a vague answer. Samantha tries to insist, but Curtis ignores her to watch the news, which talks about a gas leak that affected a family. This only increases Curtis's paranoia. The next day, Curtis finds Hannah looking at the storm through the window. When he approaches, he's scared to see a man standing outside looking at them. Curtis immediately grabs Hannah and runs to hide while the man tries to open the door. Suddenly, the entire building starts to shake, and all the objects in the living room levitate as Curtis struggles to breathe. Then everything falls, and Curtis wakes up gasping from another nightmare. To his surprise, he wet the bed. When Samantha comes in, he covers the accident with the sheets. Curtis asks for the doctor's number, and Samantha tries to help him, worried, but Curtis gets angry to prevent her from seeing the wet sheets. He immediately apologizes for the outburst, blaming himself for feeling sick, but still asks her to go to church because he can take care of Hannah. After Samantha leaves, Curtis changes the sheets and washes the evidence. Later, he takes Hannah to the library and distracts her with a children's book while researching mental illnesses. On the way back, they stop at the market to buy lots of canned food, which delays them for lunch with Hannah's family, who judge him for missing church. In the afternoon, Curtis starts cleaning the storm shelter and stores all the canned food he bought for emergencies. Then, he stays there reading the library books. Sometime later, Curtis finally goes to the doctor and explains that he's been having trouble sleeping for 4 days. The doctor thinks it's nothing serious, So Curtis also talks about the nightmares, admitting that he wet the bed and still feels the pain from the dog's bite. The doctor agrees to give him medication for a few days and asks him to see a psychiatrist in Columbus. P.S. An interesting detail is that the actor Michael Shannon, who plays Curtis, became known for his intense performances and received critical acclaim for his role. A curious point is that he improvised some key scenes in the film, which increased the authenticity of his character. Oh, and a touch of Blade Runner can be felt in the tense and paranoid atmosphere of Curtis's visions. And I definitely wouldn't lock Red outside. Poor dog. I would try to explain better to Samantha what's going on. After all, communication is key, even if it's a conversation about strange nightmares and scary storms. In the next scene, Curtis completely ignores the agent's warnings and, without telling his wife, goes to the bank and takes out a loan to renovate the house. Because, of course, who needs communication and consensus in marriage? Later at work, Curtis asks Duarte for help in taking some company equipment to build his bunker, which is totally against the rules. Duarte, with his heart in his hand, ends up agreeing and even asks if Curtis is okay, to which Curtis confidently responds that he is. After work, Curtis goes to see a local counselor and pours out all his crazy theories. The poor woman explains that she is just a counselor, not a psychiatrist, but that she can listen to him. Curtis starts talking about his mother, who one day abandoned the family and was later found eating garbage, ending up in a psychiatric hospital. Later, the family goes to a school meeting. On the way back, Curtis stops the car when he sees lightning in the sky, but no one else seems to notice, increasing his concern about his own sanity. On Saturday, while Samantha and Hannah are at the market, Curtis and Duarte start working on the shelter. When Samantha arrives and sees the scene, she completely freaks out upon discovering the loan. Curtis, however, thinks there's nothing to explain and goes to take care of Hannah while Samantha has a meltdown. During the night, Curtis takes more medication than he should and ends up having a seizure. Samantha calls an ambulance, and finally, Curtis confesses everything to her, swearing that he's trying to stay sane so as not to abandon the family like his mother did. The next day, they take Hannah for a checkup and schedule her surgery for 6 weeks later. At work, Curtis asks the boss to remove Duarte from his team and ends up receiving a warning for so many absences. And, of course, after all this, Curtis goes to buy gas masks because nothing else makes sense. Curtis continues working on the shelter, and Samantha starts mending neighbors' clothes to earn extra money, having to use even their vacation savings. At night, Curtis tries to explain his strange behaviors, and she decides to cancel the beach trip, use his last paycheck to cover bills, and postpone Hannah's surgery. She is willing to work on their marriage problems but insists that Curtis see a real psychiatrist and accompanies him to a school dinner. At the event, Duarte confronts Curtis, and a fight breaks out. Curtis finally breaks down, screaming about a devastating storm that no one is prepared to face. Samantha takes him home, and later, he has another bizarre dream with birds flying in strange patterns. When he wakes up, an alarm actually sounds, and they rush to the shelter where they spend the night. In the morning, Curtis, still in panic, hesitates to open the door, but Samantha convinces him, and they find a sunny day. The scene is reminiscent of Hitchcock's The Birds, but with a much less terrifying twist. The psychiatrist recommends that Curtis stay away from the shelter and sends him to a specialized clinic, which means he won't see his family for a while. The family decides to spend a day at the beach before Curtis goes for treatment. While building a sandcastle, Hannah signs storm pointing to the sea, and, of course, it starts raining oil. On the horizon, a huge black storm approaches, and finally, Curtis doesn't seem so crazy after all. Samantha confirms that she also sees the storm, a somewhat ironic moment of family unity. This film was inspired by director Jeff Nichols' experience with apocalyptic nightmares, and it's interesting how the film addresses the thin line between sanity and madness, with touches of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I hope you enjoyed it immensely, and I'll see you next time.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect.